Have you ever wondered what would happen if you lost everything in one single moment? What if you found yourself in a place where nobody knew your name, and you could just breathe for a while, without the weight of the world on your shoulders? Elon Musk stood outside the small, unassuming building tucked away in a quiet corner of Los Angeles. The secret eatery was known only to a select few. There were no signs or flashy advertisements, just a discreet location where celebrities, tech moguls, and other high-profile figures could escape the spotlight. Tonight, Elon wasn't just looking for a meal. He was searching for something much more elusive: peace. The air was crisp, and the streetlights flickered dimly as he walked up to the door. There was no entourage, no bodyguards, just Elon in a hoodie and sunglasses, attempting to blend into the night. For the first time in years, he wanted to experience something simple, something human. "Are you sure you want to do this?" his assistant had asked earlier in the day. "The media has been on your tail for weeks." "I don't care," Elon had replied. "I just need a break. I want to be normal, just for tonight." As he pushed the door open, the faint sound of clinking silverware and low chatter greeted him. It was a far cry from the tech conferences, the press tours, or the constant cycle of expectations that he was used to. Here, in this small, intimate place, nobody cared who he was. He could just be another person, looking for a good meal and a moment of solitude. The host, a middle-aged man with a warm smile, greeted him at the door. "Good evening, sir. Reservation?" "No, just a walk-in." "Is there a table available?" Elon asked, trying to keep his voice as neutral as possible. The host glanced at the nearly full restaurant and nodded. "We do have a table in the back, if you're okay with that." Elon nodded and followed the host through the cozy dining area. The ambience was simple, with candles flickering on each table, casting soft shadows on the walls. The quiet murmur of conversations, mixed with the occasional clink of glassware, created a sense of warmth and comfort. Elon couldn't help but feel a tinge of nostalgia for a time before fame had become his constant companion. As he sat down at the table in the back corner, he let out a deep breath. This was it. For the first time in what felt like forever, he could just be himself, free from the prying eyes of the world. But as he scanned the menu, a voice interrupted his thoughts. "Hi, welcome to the bistro. My name's Jessica, and I'll be your server tonight. Can I start you off with something to drink?" Elon looked up to see a young woman standing at his table, a warm smile on her face. She appeared to be in her late 20s, with short, dark hair and bright, expressive eyes. For a moment, he studied her face, noticing how genuine her smile seemed. It was a contrast to the carefully calculated expressions he often encountered in his own world. "Just water for now, thanks," Elon said, his voice soft. "Of course. I'll be right back," she replied, before turning and walking away. Elon tried to shake off the feeling that he was being watched, but the truth was, there was a part of him that longed to be recognized, to see how people would react to the real him. But not tonight. Tonight, he was just another customer. A few minutes later, Jessica returned with his water. As she set it down on the table, she hesitated for a brief moment, her gaze locking onto his. "Is everything okay?" Elon asked, sensing that something was off. For a second, Jessica stood frozen, staring at him with a mix of surprise and curiosity. She blinked a few times before speaking, her voice slightly shaky. I'm sorry, but are you Elon Musk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elon's heart skipped a beat. He had hoped this wouldn't happen. The last thing he wanted was to draw attention to himself in a place like this. But the cat was out of the bag. "Yes, I am," he replied with a half-smile, trying to keep things casual. "But let's keep this between us, okay? Just a regular guy tonight." Jessica's eyes widened as she processed the words. She quickly nodded, trying to regain her composure, but Elon could see that she was still visibly rattled. I I can't believe it's really you. I mean, I followed your work for years, she said, her voice trembling slightly. But I promise, I'm not going to tell anyone. You just seemed different tonight, you know. I didn't expect to see someone like you here, not in a place like this. Elon chuckled softly, feeling a little more at ease. Well, I'm just like anyone else, right? Just trying to enjoy a quiet meal. You know, sometimes I just want to be a normal person for a change. Jessica nodded quickly, her smile returning, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of empathy, or maybe understanding, that Elon couldn't quite place. For a moment, he wondered if she saw through the facade, if she could feel the weight of his world, just by looking at him. She turned to walk away, but then, almost as an afterthought, she paused. You know, she said, her voice softer now, I've always admired your work, but I always wonder what it must be like for you, you know. To carry the weight of so many expectations. I hope you get the peace you're looking for tonight. Elon froze for a moment. It wasn't the usual fan praise or the obligatory compliments he had grown used to. There was something raw, something real in her words. It felt like she understood more about him in that instant than most people did in a lifetime. As Jessica walked away, Elon sat back in his chair, processing her words. Maybe tonight wouldn't be as simple as he'd thought. Maybe, for the first time in a long while, he was about to experience something he hadn't expected, real connection. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon took a slow sip of water, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled in his chest. He had been famous for so long that moments like this, when someone saw through the armor, always felt unsettling. It wasn't that he disliked the recognition, it was just that it often came with a heavy cost, one that weighed on him more than most people understood. He glanced around the room, watching the other patrons eat their meals, laughing, and chatting. They were oblivious to the fact that a man who had fundamentally shaped the future of technology and space travel sat just a few feet away, hiding in plain sight. That was exactly what he wanted. No cameras, no reporters, no expectations. Just a few hours where he could simply exist, unnoticed. But that brief interaction with Jessica had reminded him of something he hadn't thought about in years, the burden of being Elon Musk. The weight of the public's expectations, the constant need to prove himself, the eyes that followed his every move. It had all started to feel like a cage. The walls were closing in. As he sat in the quiet comfort of the restaurant, his mind wandered back to the early days. Days when he was just a kid with big ideas, trying to make a mark on the world. Back then, there were no billion-dollar companies, no rockets reaching space, no constant media scrutiny. It was just him and his dream. A dream that, over time, had transformed him into something more, something he hadn't fully expected. His thoughts were interrupted when Jessica returned to the table, this time with a menu in hand. "Ready to order?" she asked, a little more at ease now that the surprise had worn off. But there was still that same look in her eyes, like she could see something deeper, something that others couldn't. "Yeah, I'll have the steak," Elon said, his voice a little quieter than usual. He was trying to ignore the fact that he was still processing the emotional complexity of the brief exchange they'd had earlier. "Good choice," Jessica said with a smile. "I'll put that in for you. Would you like anything else?" Elon shook his head. "No, that'll be all for now, thanks." As she walked away, he couldn't help but watch her. There was something about Jessica, her genuine warmth, the way she didn't fawn over him like so many people did. She treated him like a person, not a public figure. That was refreshing, and he couldn't remember the last time someone had spoken to him with such candor. His mind continued to drift, replaying the conversation they'd had. She had mentioned the weight of expectations. It was a phrase he often heard from others, but something in the way she said it struck him deeply. Maybe it was because, for the first time in a long time, someone was actually acknowledging how heavy that weight could be. Most people just saw the success. The headlines. The fancy cars and private jets. But nobody saw the sleepless nights, the personal sacrifices, the loneliness that came with always being on. Elon's thoughts turned to the people closest to him, his family, friends, and employees. The ones who had stuck by him through the highs and lows. It hadn't always been easy, especially in his personal life. The pressure of running multiple companies, the constant travel, and the intense focus on achieving the next big thing had taken its toll on his relationships. The feeling of always having to push forward, always striving for more, left little room for anything else. It was as if his identity was now so wrapped up in his companies and his mission that he'd lost touch with the simpler things in life, things like love, friendship, and human connection. His thoughts were interrupted once again, but this time, it wasn't Jessica. The restaurant's door swung open, and a small group of diners entered, chatting excitedly. Elon could hear snippets of their conversation, something about electric cars and space exploration. Did you hear Elon Musk is trying to colonize Mars? Can you believe it? Yeah, and he's making these electric trucks that are supposed to change the game. I don't know how he does it. Elon froze. He had thought he could escape the constant buzz about his work, even if just for a couple of hours. But there it was again, his name, his projects, following him even into this small, quiet corner of the world. He could never truly escape it. The world was too connected, too aware. Jessica noticed the shift in his demeanor and returned to the table with his steak. She set the plate down in front of him and looked at him with a concerned expression. "You okay?" she asked, her voice gentle. Elon took a deep breath, trying to shake off the tension that had suddenly flooded his body. He nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just, not used to being around so many people who know so much about me." Jessica seemed to understand, her eyes softening. "It must be exhausting, huh?" Elon paused for a moment, considering her words. How could she understand? She was just a server. But there was something about the way she spoke, as if she had seen and felt things that most people never would. Maybe it was the way her voice quivered when she talked about his life, as if she could feel the weight of it, too. "You don't know the half of it," Elon said quietly, his voice tinged with something between exhaustion and resignation. Jessica didn't press him further. Instead, she simply nodded, her smile warm but understanding. "If you need anything, just let me know," she said before turning to walk away. Elon took a bite of his steak, savoring the rich flavors. For a moment, he let himself relax. The flavors, the quiet atmosphere, the absence of the world outside, it was a small respite. But it was fleeting. The truth was, he couldn't fully escape the life he had created for himself, no matter how hard he tried. As he chewed, his thoughts wandered back to the one thing he had been avoiding for months, his own sense of isolation. People admired him for his genius, for his ambition, for his ability to change the world. But who was he when the work was done, when the lights dimmed, and the applause faded away? Maybe that was what brought him to this little restaurant in the first place. To feel like a regular person, even if just for a brief moment. To step outside the world he had created and simply exist. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something else, something he hadn't realized he needed until now. Elon sat in the dimly lit restaurant, the fork in his hand now forgotten as his thoughts drifted once again. The steak, though expertly cooked, had lost its appeal. He barely noticed the gentle hum of conversation around him or the occasional clink of silverware. His mind was far away, absorbed in the reflections that had resurfaced in the wake of his conversation with Jessica. For years, he'd been on a relentless path. The launch of SpaceX, the revolutionizing of electric vehicles with Tesla, the Hyperloop project, it was all a blur now, a whirlwind of milestones and deadlines. Each success had been celebrated by the world, but the real cost had never been revealed. It was a price he had paid in solitude, late nights, and fractured relationships. Yet, for all the technological triumphs, there was always that lingering question: what was it all for? What was the point of reaching for the stars, of pushing humanity forward, if in the process, he had lost the very connection he sought to restore? His gaze shifted back to the table where his water glass had grown warm, untouched. The ambience around him felt almost surreal now, like a dream he couldn't quite wake up from. He was still in that small, secretive eatery, but the outside world had crept in. The conversation about him was impossible to escape. He hadn't realized it, but his internal monologue had carried him through the evening until he was startled by a soft voice breaking through his thoughts. "Everything okay, Elon?" It was Jessica again, standing at the edge of his table, her hands gently clasped together. Her expression wasn't just polite, it was laced with genuine concern. Elon blinked, taking a moment to compose himself. He hadn't realized how much time had passed. His mind had been in such a deep spiral of contemplation that he had lost track of reality. "Yeah, just thinking," Elon said, his voice quieter than usual. "Sometimes it's hard to turn it all off, you know." She nodded understandingly, though he could tell she didn't entirely understand the weight of what he was saying. No one ever really did. Most people couldn't fathom the immense pressure of constantly being the one who had to have all the answers. But she was trying, and that was enough. "You're not the only one who thinks too much," she said, offering a small smile. "I get lost in my head sometimes too. But, you know, sometimes you need that moment of peace, even if it's just for a few minutes." Her words struck him more than he expected. There was a quiet wisdom in her voice that seemed to resonate with a part of him he had long ignored. He wanted to ask her more, to understand how someone so young could possess such insight, but he knew it wasn't the right moment. "Not yet, anyway. I guess I've forgotten how to take a break," Elon admitted, the weight of his own words hitting him hard. He hadn't allowed himself any true respite in years. Every day was filled with decisions, innovation, and the relentless pursuit of progress. Rest was a luxury, one that had always seemed unnecessary when there was so much left to do. Jessica's smile softened. "It's easy to forget. You just get caught up in the next thing and then the next thing, and before you know it, everything feels like a race. But you're here now, right? Taking a moment for yourself." Elon nodded, grateful for her insight. He wasn't used to people acknowledging his need for a break, let alone offering such simple yet profound advice. "You're right," he said, his voice tinged with a newfound appreciation. "I suppose I needed to hear that more than I realized." There was a pause as Jessica glanced around the room. The other diners were still immersed in their own conversations, none the wiser to the man who had changed the world sitting quietly in their midst. For a moment, Elon allowed himself to take in the normalcy of it all. The slow pace of life in this hidden corner of the city. The way people interacted without thinking of the consequences, without the constant pressure to be more, do more, achieve more. It was a kind of freedom he hadn't experienced in a long time. But even in this brief respite, the tension of his life outside these walls was never far away. He felt it, the pull of his responsibilities, the demands of his companies, the expectations from investors, employees, and the public. He could almost hear the voices in his head again, reminding him of everything that still needed to be done. But for now, he pushed those thoughts away. "You know," Jessica said as she began to walk away, "sometimes the hardest part is giving yourself permission to stop. No one really teaches you how to take a break when you're always moving forward." Elon looked up at her, his brow furrowing slightly as her words settled in. "Permission to stop. I guess you're right. It's almost like I've forgotten how to let go." She smiled and nodded. "Well, you're doing it now. I'll leave you to enjoy your meal." Elon watched as she walked back to the kitchen, her presence leaving behind a strange sense of calm. He wasn't sure if it was her words, the environment, or simply the stillness of the moment, but something had shifted within him. Maybe it was the realization that he couldn't keep running forever. The need to always push forward, always innovate, while admirable, had come at a cost. And it was that cost, perhaps more than anything, that had left him feeling empty despite all his accomplishments. The steak remained mostly untouched. His stomach was no longer hungry. But his soul, a part of him that had been starved for so long, was beginning to feel nourished in a way he hadn't expected. Just as Elon started to sit back and let the stillness of the moment wash over him, a familiar face walked in through the door. He didn't recognize the man immediately, but something about him seemed to stand out. He was in his 40s, wearing a sharp suit, with an air of confidence that commanded attention. The man glanced around the room, scanning the tables with a look that seemed to search for something, or someone. And then, as if by instinct, his eyes landed on Elon. For a brief moment, they locked eyes. Elon couldn't help but wonder if the man had recognized him. But instead of coming over to speak, the man simply nodded once and then turned toward the bar. The brief exchange left Elon with a strange feeling. For the first time in a while, he was reminded that even in a place like this, away from the press, away from the limelight, he was never truly alone. There was always someone who would recognize him, always someone who knew exactly who he was. And yet, in the quiet of the room, Elon was left wondering whether anyone could ever truly see him, not as the billionaire inventor, not as the visionary entrepreneur, but as the person he had long since forgotten. Elon's thoughts swirled as he watched the man in the sharp suit take a seat at the bar. There was something about him, something offbeat, like he didn't belong in a place like this. It was a small, cozy restaurant, far removed from the corporate world, and yet this man, with his polished appearance, seemed out of place. Elon took another sip of water, trying to shake the feeling of being watched. He had been caught in this cycle before, the unshakable sense that no matter where he went, someone was always waiting for him, for a glimpse, for an opportunity to make their move. But this time was different. This time, he didn't want to be found. Not tonight. Not here. He looked down at his untouched meal, pushing the steak around on the plate. The food, once appealing, now felt like nothing more than a distraction from the thoughts crowding his mind. The rest of the restaurant seemed to fade into the background, with only the man at the bar and the quiet hum of the room remaining. Jessica reappeared, this time with a small dessert in hand, an assortment of fresh berries and whipped cream. She set it down in front of him with a soft smile. "I thought you might want to try the berries," she said. "They're really popular here." Elon offered a faint smile in return, not quite sure how to respond. He had become so accustomed to only being served when the orders were placed in advance. The simplicity of it, the kindness in her gesture, felt like something foreign to him. It was a reminder that he didn't have to always be Elon Musk, the mogul who never stopped. There was still a part of him that longed for the days when he was just a guy at a table, having a quiet dinner. "Thanks, Jessica. I appreciate it," Elon replied, his voice quiet but genuine. "Of course," she said, turning to leave. "I'll check back in a bit, but enjoy your meal." As she walked away, Elon's gaze drifted back to the man at the bar. The figure had yet to look in his direction again, but Elon couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. There was an intensity about him, like he was waiting for something to happen, something to click. It wasn't paranoia, it was a gut instinct that Elon had learned to trust over the years. He tried to push the thought away, but it lingered, gnawing at him. Something about the man's presence felt too purposeful, too deliberate. Elon had dealt with a lot of people in his time, people who had wanted something from him, people who were seeking attention, or maybe trying to leverage his name for their own gain. But this man. This was different. This was the kind of person who seemed to have their own agenda. Elon leaned back in his chair, trying to relax, but it wasn't easy. The sense of unease continued to rise like an invisible pressure against his chest. There were moments in his life when he couldn't quite put his finger on it, but his instincts told him that something was about to shift. And then, as if on cue, the man at the bar stood up and made his way toward the door. Elon watched him leave with a quiet sense of curiosity. There was something about the way the man had moved, his purposeful stride, his confident posture, that spoke volumes. Elon wondered if he'd imagined the whole thing, or if the man truly had been waiting for something. He glanced at the door, but the man was gone. For a brief moment, Elon sat in the quiet stillness, watching the dim light of the restaurant flicker ever so slightly. His mind was spinning. He had been followed before, stalked by ambitious business people or journalists, but this felt different. He wasn't sure if the man had recognized him for who he was or if he simply had an interest in the restaurant. Still, the exchange felt like an omen, one that would soon lead him to something he wasn't prepared for. Before he could dwell on it further, a loud laugh broke through his reverie. It was one of the diners from across the room, a group of friends gathered around a table, sharing a bottle of wine. The sound, though light-hearted, felt out of place in the heaviness of his thoughts. Elon was reminded once more that he was trapped in a world where even moments of escape were fleeting. As his eyes swept the room once more, his gaze settled back on Jessica, who had returned to the kitchen. There was something calming about her, something human, almost vulnerable, and Elon found himself drawn to that simplicity. It was a contrast to the overwhelming nature of his own life. For a moment, he allowed himself to wonder if he could simply stay here, in this unassuming corner of the world. What would it be like to truly disconnect, to step out of his empire and become just another person sitting at a table? To live without the constant pull of the future, the ceaseless demands of his companies, and the never-ending pursuit of innovation? The thought was tempting. But then, as if reminding him of his responsibilities, his phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a message from Gwynne Shotwell, SpaceX's president, notifying him about an urgent update regarding the next rocket launch. Elon sighed, glancing at the text. It wasn't unexpected. In fact, he'd known this moment was coming. SpaceX, Tesla, the Boring Company, Neuralink, all of it demanded his attention, no matter how much he wanted to ignore it. He reluctantly picked up his phone and started typing a quick reply. Make sure the launch is on schedule. Keep me posted. He pressed send and placed the phone back on the table, feeling the weight of his responsibilities settle back onto his shoulders. He could never escape the pull of his work, no matter how hard he tried. As he returned his focus to his half-eaten berries, he couldn't help but feel a sense of inevitability. The man in the suit, the tension in the air, it was all part of the pattern. He couldn't escape the world he had built. No matter where he went, no matter how hard he tried to hide, it always found him. Jessica returned again, this time with a quick smile as she cleared his plate. How was everything? Good, Elon replied, his voice distant. Everything was great, really. She nodded, accepting his answer. I'm glad. If you need anything else, don't hesitate to let me know. Elon watched her walk away once more, and for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to breathe deeply. The quiet of the restaurant, the simplicity of the moment, it felt almost like a fleeting dream, one that would end as soon as he stepped back into his life. But for now, he could enjoy it. He could savor the calm before the storm. For one fleeting moment, he wasn't Elon Musk, the CEO, the visionary. He was just a man, sitting at a table, trying to find a moment of peace. And maybe that was all he needed. Just a small break before everything shifted again. Elon sat back in his chair, his mind now racing with the realization that his moment of peace was slipping away. The world outside was calling for him, as it always did. The weight of his responsibilities, SpaceX, Tesla, and all the ventures that seemed to demand his constant attention, was settling back onto his shoulders like a heavy cloak. As he looked around the restaurant once again, he noticed that the atmosphere had subtly shifted. The earlier tranquility, the soft hum of conversations, and the gentle clinking of silverware all seemed a little more distant now. Even the warm flicker of the candle on his table felt muted, like it too understood that the moment of calm had passed. And then, just as he was about to push those thoughts aside, the door opened again, and a new figure stepped inside. Elon glanced up, his instincts telling him to be cautious. The man who entered this time was different. Not in appearance, he was dressed simply in jeans and a leather jacket, but there was something about him that felt familiar. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes moved with a sense of purpose, scanning the room as if he were looking for someone. Elon watched him carefully, noting the way the man seemed to be scanning the tables. He was searching for something, or perhaps someone, just like the man from earlier. Elon felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. As if on cue, the man's gaze landed on him. There was no mistaking it, this man had recognized him. And even though Elon had been attempting to remain inconspicuous, it was clear now that the world always had a way of finding him. The man started toward him, his steps deliberate. Elon's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected this. He had hoped for a quiet evening, a fleeting escape from the relentless demands of his life. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. The man came to a stop in front of Elon's table, a half-smile on his face. Elon remained seated, trying to maintain his composure, though the sudden appearance of this stranger unnerved him. "Mr. Musk," the man said with an easy confidence. "I wasn't expecting to find you here, of all places." Elon raised an eyebrow, unsure how to respond. He had met a lot of people in his life, investors, engineers, competitors, but this man didn't fit any of those categories. He was different. "Do I know you?" Elon asked, his tone casual, though his mind was racing. The man smiled, almost as though he were amused by the question. "Not yet. But I've been following your work for quite a while. I think it's safe to say I'm one of your admirers." Elon didn't respond immediately. He studied the man carefully, trying to gauge his intentions. He had no doubt that this wasn't just a casual fan who wanted to exchange pleasantries. No, this man was here for something. "Sit down," Elon said, motioning to the empty chair across from him. "I'm guessing you didn't come all this way just to chat about rockets and electric cars." The man hesitated for a split second before sitting down. There was something unnerving about the way he held himself, like he had an agenda, but he wasn't in any hurry to reveal it. "I'll get straight to the point, Mr. Musk," the man said, his voice low and steady. "I represent a group that's been monitoring your progress. You've achieved a lot, more than most people could ever dream of. But we think you're capable of even more." Elon frowned, his instincts telling him that this was not a typical business proposition. "Go on," he said, his tone cool. "We believe you're ready for the next step," the man continued. "The kind of work that will change the course of humanity, but not in the way you've been going about it. It's not just about space or cars or even AI. There's something bigger that you're meant to unlock." Elon leaned forward slightly, intrigued despite himself. There was something compelling about the man's words, though they felt cryptic and vague. The mention of a bigger purpose resonated with him, but he wasn't sure whether to trust this person, or his motivations. "What do you mean by something bigger?" Elon asked, his voice cautious but curious. The man's eyes glinted with something Elon couldn't quite place. Was it excitement? Or something darker? Something that's been hidden from you, hidden from everyone, for centuries. A network of influence and power, Mr. Musk. And we think you're ready to join us, to become part of it. The words hung in the air like a dark cloud. Elon's mind raced. This wasn't just a conversation about business or innovation. This was something else entirely. Something deeper. "And what's in it for you?" Elon asked. "What's your angle?" The man chuckled, as if Elon's question were both predictable and naive. "It's not about what's in it for us. It's about what's in it for you. The world is changing, Mr. Musk. You've already seen that. But the future isn't written by the people who are only focused on building businesses or sending rockets to Mars. The future is written by those who have the vision to see beyond the veil, beyond the limits of what we currently understand." Elon felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard rumors over the years, whispers about secret organizations, shadowy figures who believed they were the true architects of the future. But he had always dismissed them as conspiracy theories. Now, here he was, sitting across from one of these people, being offered a glimpse into something he hadn't ever imagined. And yet, despite the unsettling nature of the conversation, there was a part of him, perhaps the same part that had always driven him to push the boundaries of innovation, that felt drawn to the possibilities. "I don't know what you're talking about," Elon said, though his words lacked conviction. Deep down, he was beginning to understand that this wasn't a casual conversation. This was an invitation to something far beyond what he had ever dared to dream. The man smiled again, as if he had expected this response. "Of course not. But think about it. Think about all the questions you've had. The mysteries that have never been answered, the pieces that don't quite fit. The answers are out there, Mr. Musk. And we can help you find them." The silence that followed was thick with tension. Elon's mind raced as the words echoed in his head. This was more than just a business proposal. This was an offer to step into a world of secrets, of hidden knowledge, of power, and it was an offer he couldn't easily refuse. Elon sat still, his thoughts racing like a high-speed train, as the man across from him continued speaking. The weight of the offer seemed to hang in the air, pulling at him like a magnet. It wasn't just a business deal or a new venture, it was something much bigger, something that could completely alter the course of his life. The man's words were compelling, no doubt. They echoed with a kind of wisdom and confidence that Elon had rarely encountered. But at the same time, the cryptic nature of the proposition left him feeling uneasy. "I don't think I understand," Elon said, trying to keep his voice even. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" The man leaned forward slightly, his eyes gleaming with intensity. "We're asking you to join us, Mr. Musk. To step away from the public eye, from the companies you've built, and focus on something far more important. We want you to be part of a movement, an initiative that has the potential to reshape everything, humanity's future, the course of history itself." Elon's mind raced. He had never been one to shy away from bold, revolutionary ideas. He had always dreamed big, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, each of his companies was built on the foundation of challenging the status quo. But this was different. This wasn't about innovation or technology. This was something far more personal. "Why me?" Elon asked, his voice quieter now, almost a whisper. "There are plenty of smart people out there. Why do you think I'm the one you need?" The man smiled, his expression almost serene. "Because, Mr. Musk, you're different. You've always seen the world differently, more clearly, more boldly. You've already begun the work we've been preparing for. You've made the connections, unlocked the potential. The world doesn't realize it yet, but they will. You're on the verge of something truly transformative, and we can help you unlock it." Elon felt a shiver run down his spine. The words, though vague, struck a chord deep within him. He had always prided himself on his ability to see what others couldn't, to push the limits of what was possible. But this was different. This wasn't about rockets or electric cars or even artificial intelligence. This was something far more profound. The man paused, letting the silence stretch between them. Then, he leaned back in his chair and gave Elon a look that was both calculated and reassuring. "There are forces at play in this world that most people don't understand, Mr. Musk," he continued. "Powerful forces that have been shaping the course of human history for centuries. You've been chasing something, haven't you? Searching for answers. Whether it's the quest for sustainable energy, the exploration of Mars, or the pursuit of AI, it's all been leading you here, to this moment." Elon felt his pulse quicken as the man spoke. It was true. He had always felt that there was something more to all of his endeavors. Every step he took, every decision he made, had felt like it was part of a larger puzzle. But he had never been able to put the pieces together, never understood exactly what it was he was meant to find. "Are you saying this, this movement you're talking about is something I've been working toward all along? Elon asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. That everything I've done so far has been some kind of preparation for this? The man nodded, his eyes never leaving Elon's. Yes. Everything. The path you've taken, the decisions you've made, they've been part of a much bigger plan. You've been drawn to the very forces we represent, whether you've realized it or not. Now, it's time to take the next step. Elon sat back in his chair, trying to absorb the magnitude of what the man was saying. His mind was spinning. He had always believed that his work, his life, was about pushing the limits of what humanity could achieve. But now, this mysterious figure was suggesting that his entire life had been leading up to something else. Something hidden, something far more significant. So, what exactly is this next step? Elon asked, his curiosity piqued despite his unease. The man leaned in closer, lowering his voice slightly as if he were about to reveal a great secret. It's about connecting the dots, Mr. Musk. It's about understanding the true potential of the work you've already begun. There's technology, yes. There's space exploration. But there's something deeper, something that lies beyond all of that. A hidden network of influence, knowledge, and power. We've been waiting for someone like you to see it, to understand it. Elon's heart raced as the man's words sank in. The idea of a hidden network sounded like something out of a conspiracy theory, and yet, there was a part of him, a part he couldn't quite explain, that felt drawn to it. He had always believed in thinking outside the box, in challenging conventional wisdom. But this was something else. This was about stepping into a realm of knowledge that had been kept secret for generations. You're talking about, what, exactly? Elon asked, still not fully grasping the scope of the offer. The man smiled again, his expression both enigmatic and knowing. We're talking about unlocking the true potential of humanity, Mr. Musk. There's a way forward, a way to break through the barriers that have held us back. And we believe you're the one who can lead us there. Elon felt his mind whirl. He had always dreamed of changing the world, of making a lasting impact. But this? This was a whole different level. This was about power. Not just the kind of power that came from technology or industry, but a deeper, more mysterious kind of power. Why don't you tell me everything, Elon said finally, his voice steady. Let's stop with the cryptic talk. If you want me to join whatever this is, I need to know exactly what I'm getting into. The man's smile widened, and for the first time, Elon caught a glimpse of something darker in his eyes. Of course, the man said, his voice smooth and confident. But first, we need to make sure you're ready. This path isn't for everyone. It requires a level of commitment, a willingness to look beyond the world you know. You'll need to make sacrifices, personal sacrifices, and you'll face challenges that will test everything you believe. But if you're willing to take that step, to fully embrace what lies ahead, then we can show you the way. Elon sat silently for a moment, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts and questions. He had always known that his work was pushing the boundaries of what humanity could achieve. But this was something else entirely. Something far beyond rockets and cars. Something much, much bigger. For the first time, Elon wasn't sure if he was ready. But the offer was there, tantalizing, hanging in the air like an unspoken promise. And despite the uncertainty, he couldn't help but wonder, was he really ready to take the next step? The silence in the restaurant seemed to stretch for an eternity. Elon leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping absent-mindedly on the table, though his mind was miles away. Every word the man had said reverberated in his brain, a constant reminder of the impossible decision he now faced. The idea of joining this shadowy group, of stepping into a realm of secrets and unseen power, was both exhilarating and terrifying. It was a chance to be part of something much bigger than anything he had ever imagined. But at the same time, it was a plunge into the unknown, a step away from everything he had worked so hard to build. Elon had always prided himself on making decisions quickly, trusting his instincts, but this was different. The stakes were higher than anything he had ever faced. The more he thought about it, the more questions bubbled to the surface. What was this hidden network the man spoke of? What kind of power did it wield? And most importantly, what would it mean for his life, his companies, and the world? The man's voice cut through the haze of Elon's thoughts. I understand that this is a lot to take in, Mr. Musk, he said, his tone smooth and patient. But understand this, it's an opportunity that doesn't come around often. The kind of change we're talking about, it's not something that can be achieved by traditional means. Elon's gaze shifted toward the man across from him. There was no mistaking the conviction in his voice, the certainty with which he spoke. He wasn't selling some dream or a half-baked idea. This was real. And if it was real, that meant the implications were enormous. But what was the cost? I'm not sure I can just walk away from everything I've built, Elon said, his voice quieter now, almost to himself. Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, these are my life's work. I can't just turn my back on them for something I don't understand. The man gave a slight nod, as though he had anticipated Elon's response. We're not asking you to walk away, Mr. Musk. What we're offering is the chance to amplify everything you've done so far. You've already changed the world with your innovations. What if you could do even more? What if you could unlock potential that's been hidden from you? Imagine how far you could go. Elon looked down at the table, his thoughts swirling. There was truth in the man's words. He had always been driven by a desire to push the boundaries of what was possible, to challenge the limits of technology and human potential. But could this hidden path really take him further than the paths he had already carved out for himself? He glanced up, meeting the man's gaze once again. And if I say no? What happens then? The man didn't flinch. He simply regarded Elon with a calm expression, as though this question was inevitable. If you say no, nothing changes. You'll continue on your current path. You'll keep pushing the limits in the ways you already have, and you'll have your successes and failures. But you'll never know what could have been. You'll never know what you might have unlocked. Elon's chest tightened. The weight of the decision was becoming heavier with each passing second. He had always been a man of action, a man who took risks. But this felt different. This felt like stepping off a cliff into a void, not knowing where the ground would be or what would happen when he hit it. But then again, hadn't he been living on the edge for his entire career? Hadn't every venture, every company he had started, been a leap into the unknown? SpaceX, for example, he had taken on the impossible when everyone told him it couldn't be done. Tesla, too. The odds had been stacked against him from the beginning, but he had pushed through. Why should this be any different? Okay, Elon said, the words leaving his mouth before he fully understood why. I'll hear you out. Tell me what this is all about. But I'm not making any promises. The man's smile widened, a sense of satisfaction evident in his expression. That's all we ask, Mr. Musk. Just an open mind. He sat back in his chair, as though preparing to reveal the deepest secrets of the universe. The truth is, there are forces in the world that shape the course of human history. Most people never see them. They live their lives, work their jobs, and never realize that there are hidden networks of power that dictate everything from politics to economics to technological advancements. These networks have been around for centuries, carefully woven into the fabric of society. Elon's brow furrowed as he listened. He had always been aware of power structures and the way influence shaped the world, but this was something new. Something deeper. The network we're part of, the man continued, has its roots in ancient organizations. Secret societies, hidden orders, these are the groups that have held the keys to the future. They've always been there, shaping the world from behind the scenes. And now, they're offering you a seat at the table. Elon felt a shiver run down his spine. This was the stuff of movies, of conspiracy theories, yet there was something in the man's demeanor that made it feel too real to dismiss. "And what does this network want from me?" Elon asked, his voice steady despite the storm of questions raging in his mind. The man's eyes gleamed. "We need someone who understands technology, who has the vision to see beyond the limits of what's possible. You've been pushing humanity forward, Mr. Musk. We believe you can help us unlock the next level, the next great leap. But it requires you to think differently. To see the world not as it is, but as it could be." Elon didn't respond right away. He was beginning to understand the gravity of what the man was saying. It wasn't just a partnership, it was a complete rethinking of everything he had ever believed. A step into a world that operated on a different set of rules, a world of hidden power and influence. He felt a pull inside himself, an urge to dive deeper, to understand it all. But there was also a warning deep in his gut, telling him to tread carefully. This was unfamiliar ground, and he wasn't sure he could trust the people offering him this opportunity. But in his heart, Elon knew one thing for certain: he couldn't turn back now. Whatever this path was, it was calling to him. And whether he was ready or not, he had to take the next step. The decision was made. Elon could feel the weight of it settle into the pit of his stomach. His mind buzzed with the implications of what he had just agreed to, yet there was a part of him that couldn't help but feel the thrill of uncertainty. For someone who had spent his life pushing the boundaries of what was possible, this new venture was the ultimate leap into something completely uncharted. As the man across from him stood up, signaling the end of their conversation, Elon's thoughts raced. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice steady but with an underlying sense of urgency. The man smiled, the same knowing smile that had both intrigued and unsettled him from the start. "Now, Mr. Musk, we begin the next phase. This is where the real work begins." They stood up together, and the man reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small, sleek device. It was nothing like the flashy, consumer-friendly gadgets Elon was used to creating. This was minimalist, simple, and mysterious. "This will be your entry point," the man said, handing Elon the device. "It contains everything you need to begin. The path we're offering is not a simple one, Mr. Musk. It requires dedication, sacrifice, and a willingness to see beyond the ordinary." Elon took the device, feeling its cool surface in his hand. It was weighty, but it didn't look like anything extraordinary. Just a small black rectangle, almost too plain to be of any importance. "What is this?" Elon asked, his curiosity piqued. "It's the key to everything," the man replied cryptically. "We'll be in touch. There's no going back after this, Mr. Musk. Are you sure you're ready?" Elon hesitated for a moment, the weight of the question sinking in. He had always been a man of action, always charging forward. But this? This felt like something else entirely. Something deeper. Something that could not be undone once it was set in motion. But as his gaze settled on the man before him, something within him clicked. Elon knew he couldn't turn back now. There was a fire burning inside him, a need to know more, to understand the bigger picture, to push the boundaries not just of technology, but of humanity itself. "I'm ready," Elon said, his voice calm but resolute. The man's smile widened. "Good. Remember, Mr. Musk, what you're about to embark on is not for the faint of heart. It will test you in ways you can't even imagine. But if you succeed, the world will never be the same again." With those final words, the man turned and walked away, leaving Elon standing alone in the dimly lit restaurant. For a moment, Elon just stood there, staring at the small device in his hand. It was like holding a key to a locked door, one that led to a world he couldn't yet see but could feel calling to him. As he left the restaurant, stepping out into the cool night air, the gravity of his decision settled over him like a heavy cloak. He didn't know where this path would lead or what awaited him on the other side. But one thing was certain: his life was about to change in ways he could not predict. Back at his office, Elon sat at his desk, staring at the device. He hadn't touched it since he left the restaurant, unsure of how to proceed. But now, in the stillness of the night, with nothing but the hum of his computers around him, he felt a sense of urgency creeping in. What was this network that had been hidden in the shadows for so long? What was it they saw in him? And, perhaps most importantly, what did they want? He needed answers. And the device was the only way to get them. Elon reached for it and powered it on. A small light blinked to life, and the screen flickered briefly before a message appeared. "Welcome, Mr. Musk. You are about to begin your journey." His heart skipped a beat. It was almost as though the device was alive, reacting to his presence. The message disappeared just as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a map of sorts. It was nothing like any map Elon had ever seen. It wasn't geographical, but instead a series of interconnected nodes, like a vast network. At the center of the map was a single, pulsating light, glowing brightly and slowly expanding and contracting, like a heartbeat. Around it were smaller nodes, each connected by thin lines that radiated outward, creating a complex web. Elon's pulse quickened as he stared at the map, trying to make sense of it. But it didn't make sense. None of it did. It was like trying to decipher a language he didn't know, a code he had never been taught. He tapped on one of the smaller nodes, and the screen flickered again, this time displaying a string of letters and numbers, along with a brief message. "The path begins here. To move forward, you must first unlock the knowledge hidden in the pattern." Elon frowned, his mind working overtime to process what he was seeing. The cryptic language, the connections between nodes, it all felt like something out of a science fiction novel. Yet, there was a deep sense of truth to it, something that made his instincts buzz with excitement. He leaned closer to the screen, studying the pattern more intently. Each node seemed to represent something, an idea, a concept, a connection. But what? What did they mean? The answer, it seemed, was just beyond his grasp. But as he stared at the glowing nodes, one of them began to pulse brighter than the rest, drawing his attention. It was in the top right corner, far away from the central node, and it seemed to flicker as though it were alive. His fingers hovered over the device. There was something about this particular node that felt important. Without thinking, Elon tapped it. The screen went black. For a moment, he thought the device had malfunctioned, but then a new message appeared, this one in bold letters. "Congratulations, Mr. Musk. You've taken the first step. Prepare for what comes next." Before he could react, the device powered off completely. Elon sat back in his chair, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. He had unlocked something, something huge. But what was it? What had he just started? Elon couldn't shake the feeling of disquiet that clung to him after the device powered down. It wasn't just that he had unlocked something cryptic, it was the nature of the thing itself. The way it felt almost sentient, the strange hum that seemed to pulse in his mind as much as in his hand, made him wonder if this was some kind of elaborate test or game. But the feeling gnawed at him deeper, that it was no longer just a test of intelligence, it was a test of his will. For hours, he sat at his desk, his eyes fixated on the dark screen. What had he really triggered? And more pressing, why? Why him? Why now? The more Elon pondered, the more unsettled he became, as if some unseen hand was guiding him, pulling him forward toward an uncertain future. He had always been the one in control of his ventures, whether it was with Tesla, SpaceX, or Neuralink. He made the decisions. He saw the problems before they even emerged. But this? This felt like someone else was pulling the strings. Someone, or something, had decided it was time for him to make this leap. Without warning, the device vibrated in his hand again. Elon's breath caught in his throat as he quickly turned his attention back to the screen. The words flickered to life, as if responding to his thoughts. Ready to proceed? Elon's heart beat faster. He had no idea what proceeding even meant. Yet, some part of him knew that if he didn't, he might never get another chance. He hesitated for a moment before his fingers instinctively tapped the screen, choosing to move forward into the unknown. Very well. The screen displayed the words in quick succession, followed by a new map. This one was vastly different, a complex maze of lines and symbols interwoven in a pattern that seemed to shift with every glance. The nodes were now accompanied by short, cryptic phrases. Elon's eyes locked on the first phrase. Trust no one but yourself. It was a warning, and Elon had no intention of ignoring it. In the world he navigated daily, trust was a rare commodity. He had seen enough backstabbing, manipulation, and false promises to know that blind faith was dangerous. He was no stranger to betrayal, but what if this was different? What if this was the one time where he truly couldn't trust anyone else? He pondered the message carefully, taking a deep breath before reading the next phrase. The world you see is not what it seems. It was becoming increasingly clear to Elon that this was not just a game. This was an invitation to uncover something deeper, something hidden right beneath the surface of the world he knew so well. But what could it be? Elon ran a hand through his hair, frustration building. He had never been one for riddles, preferring direct, actionable problems that could be solved through logic and innovation. Yet this felt like something different. There were no clear instructions, no tangible answers. All he had were vague, cryptic messages and a map that seemed to mock his every move. But Elon was no stranger to challenges. He had made his fortune and built his empire on the ability to turn the impossible into the possible. If this was an obstacle, he would solve it like any other. He zoomed in on one of the nodes, a flashing light near the top of the map. The accompanying phrase read, "The path is open, but only to those who can see the unseen." This time, Elon didn't hesitate. He tapped the node, expecting another cryptic message, but instead, the screen shifted violently, blurring and warping. For a moment, Elon thought he had broken the device, but then, everything froze. The lights in his office flickered, and the sound of his computer's hard drive humming grew louder. In an instant, the device's screen transformed, displaying an entirely different set of coordinates, one that didn't exist on any known map. Elon's pulse quickened. This wasn't a place he recognized. These coordinates led to a remote location in the middle of the desert, a place that was far off the beaten path. The place seemed too remote. A new message appeared on the screen. Your journey begins now. Follow the coordinates. Find the location. You will be guided. A deep shiver ran down Elon's spine. There was no way this could be real. Yet, he could feel the weight of it, the sense that this was more than a mere digital trail. It was a physical journey. He had to go. Elon closed his eyes briefly, gathering his thoughts. This was insane. But at the same time, his instincts screamed at him that he couldn't back down now. Something bigger was at play here. Something far beyond his understanding. He grabbed his jacket and walked toward the door of his office. His mind raced with questions, but one thing was clear, the device had unlocked the next step. The game was real, and he was no longer in control. The next morning, Elon found himself standing at the edge of a small, private airstrip. A jet was waiting for him, its engines humming in preparation. He had arranged everything in less than 24 hours, his security team had pulled every string necessary to secure his travel, but none of them knew the full story. No one did. Except for him. And now, the device. He climbed into the jet, sitting by the window, his gaze fixed on the horizon as the plane took off. He was flying into the unknown, and with each passing moment, the unease gnawed at him more. This wasn't a routine business trip. This wasn't a venture for a new startup. This was something entirely different, something that threatened to shift everything he had known, and perhaps even changed the very fabric of reality. As the miles passed beneath him, Elon's thoughts grew darker. What if this was all some kind of elaborate trap? What if the network wasn't what it seemed? What if the unseen hand was not some force for good, but an oppressive power bent on manipulating him? The device buzzed again in his pocket, breaking his thoughts. He pulled it out, eyes darting across the screen. You're on the right path, but remember, trust no one but yourself. Elon's stomach churned. There was no turning back now. The desert stretched endlessly beneath Elon as his jet soared over the arid landscape. Below him, the earth was an expansive canvas of dusty browns and ochres, broken only by the occasional flicker of something green, perhaps a small oasis or a forgotten settlement. He had seen deserts before, he had flown over them in his rockets and drones, navigating the world's most remote areas in his constant quest for the new frontier. But this was different. This was more than just a barren land. As the plane descended toward the coordinates displayed on the mysterious device, Elon's pulse quickened. The landscape below appeared to be even more desolate than he had anticipated. There was no sign of civilization, no signs of life, just a vast expanse of nothingness, as if nature itself had forsaken this place. The jet's wheels touched the tarmac of a small, isolated airstrip, a strip of concrete barely visible amidst the sprawling desert. The sight sent a wave of unease rippling through Elon's chest. No other planes were in sight, and there were no vehicles to greet him. Just silence and an overwhelming sense of isolation. He stepped out onto the tarmac, the heat hitting him like a wave, despite the early morning hours. The dry air scraped against his skin, and the sharp scent of dust filled his nostrils. Elon adjusted his sunglasses, scanning the horizon for any sign of life, but all he could see was the vast emptiness. He reached into his pocket and retrieved the device. The screen lit up with a soft glow, casting a faint light on his face. A new message appeared. You've arrived. Walk the path before you. Seek what is hidden in plain sight. Elon took a deep breath, his fingers gripping the device tighter. The message seemed to be urging him onward, but what exactly was it referring to? He scanned the area once more, but all he saw was an abandoned shack in the distance, its windows shattered, its walls leaning precariously as if it had been left to rot for decades. Seek what is hidden, Elon muttered under his breath. Was the shack the key? He had no other lead, so without hesitation, he began to walk toward it. Each step felt heavy, as if the ground itself was reluctant to let him pass. The oppressive heat made it harder to focus, but he pushed forward, determined to discover what lay ahead. As he approached the dilapidated shack, a strange chill washed over him, despite the searing heat. The air seemed to grow still, and the world around him felt distant, like he had stepped into a different realm altogether. The shack looked like it had been abandoned for years, if not longer. Its wooden structure was weathered and cracked, the paint peeling from the walls like old skin. There were no signs of life, not even the occasional sound of a bird or the wind rattling the debris. He walked around the shack, scanning for any clues, any signs of life. As he rounded the back corner, something caught his eye, a strange symbol etched into the wood. It was small, barely visible unless you were looking for it, hidden in plain sight. It resembled a spiral, intricate and looping, with an almost hypnotic quality to it. Elon knelt down, examining the symbol closely. The edges were worn, but it was unmistakable. This was no random marking, it was deliberate, purposeful. But what did it mean? He reached out, his fingers brushing against the symbol, and for a brief moment, the ground beneath him seemed to tremble. His heart raced as a faint buzzing sound echoed in his ears, and the device in his pocket vibrated violently. You are close. Find the key, and the path will reveal itself. His mind raced. Was the symbol the key? Was it pointing to something hidden? He stood up, his gaze scanning the rest of the shack's surroundings, looking for something, anything that could lead him to the next step. Suddenly, his attention was drawn to a small metal door at the back of the shack, partially obscured by a pile of rocks. It was easy to miss if you weren't paying attention, but now it seemed impossibly obvious. Elon moved toward it, his heart pounding in his chest. His instinct screamed at him to keep going. The door creaked loudly as he pushed it open, revealing a narrow staircase that led downward, disappearing into the darkness beneath. The air around him felt cooler, the oppressive desert heat fading as he descended. Elon hesitated for a moment, his mind racing. What if this was some kind of trap? What if this was where everything went wrong? But then, the cryptic message from the device replayed in his mind, "Seek what is hidden in plain sight." He took a deep breath and stepped into the darkness. The narrow staircase seemed to go on forever. With every step he took, the air grew colder, more sterile. There was no sound, just the eerie quiet, broken only by the soft scuff of his boots on the stone steps. As he descended, the walls began to change. The stone was no longer rough and uneven but polished, almost too smooth to be natural. The temperature dropped even further, and soon he could see his breath misting in the cold air. At the bottom of the stairs, he was greeted by a large, steel door. The kind of door you might find in a high-security facility. A keypad was embedded into the wall next to it, but there were no instructions, nothing to indicate what it required to open. Elon stared at the door for a long moment. His mind raced through possibilities, trying to understand the puzzle in front of him. He had no idea what he was supposed to do here, but then, something clicked. He reached into his jacket pocket and retrieved the device once more. The screen flickered to life, and a message appeared. "Enter the code, Mr. Musk. Only you can unlock the next phase." His pulse quickened. He stared at the keypad and then back at the device, almost as if it were taunting him. He had no clue what the code was, but the device didn't seem to want him to back out now. With no other choice, Elon began to input numbers, his birth year, the coordinates of his companies, numbers from his past ventures. But nothing worked. The door remained stubbornly locked. Frustration built inside him, but then, he remembered the symbol outside the shack, the spiral. Could it be that simple? He hesitated for a moment, then began entering the numbers based on the spiral pattern, tracing the circular movement of the symbol. As his fingers pressed each number, the door's locks disengaged, one by one. When he entered the final number, the door slid open, revealing a hidden chamber. What lay inside would change everything. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon stepped through the steel door, his boots clanging against the metallic floor as he entered the dark chamber. The air inside was cold and sterile, a stark contrast to the desert heat outside. His breath misted in front of him, and he instinctively reached for his jacket, pulling it tighter around him. The room stretched out before him, dimly lit by flickering lights embedded in the walls. The atmosphere was unnervingly quiet, as if the place had been forgotten for decades. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light, Elon saw a long hallway stretching ahead, its walls adorned with strange, intricate symbols, similar to the one on the shack outside. The markings seemed to pulse with a faint energy, drawing him in with a magnetic force he couldn't explain. His mind raced. What kind of place was this? And what was the purpose of the device that had led him here? He took a cautious step forward, the sound of his footsteps echoing through the chamber, and his eyes darted around, scanning the room for any sign of life or further clues. But there was nothing. No people, no guards, no cameras, just the quiet hum of the lights and the faint scent of metal and dust. At the end of the hall stood another door, this one far larger than the one he had just passed through. The door was made of solid steel, its surface covered in the same strange markings that adorned the walls. The symbol that had appeared on the shack, the spiral, was emblazoned across its center. He reached out to touch it, his hand hovering just above the surface. The moment his fingers made contact, the door creaked loudly, as if it had been waiting for him. A soft hiss filled the air, followed by a faint click. The door slowly opened before him, revealing a vast room unlike any he had ever seen. Inside, the room was cavernous, with high ceilings that disappeared into shadow. The walls were lined with what looked like enormous machines, complicated, mechanical contraptions that hummed with power. Each one seemed to be connected to the others by a web of glowing wires and pipes. The air was thick with the smell of oil and metal, and the floor was covered in a thick layer of dust, as if no one had been here for years. Elon's heart began to race as he stepped further into the room, the strange symbols etched into the walls casting an eerie glow. He couldn't help but feel like he had just stumbled upon something far greater than he could comprehend. This wasn't just a hidden facility, it was a labyrinth of technology and secrets. As he walked deeper into the room, he noticed something that stopped him in his tracks. At the center of the room, a massive, circular pedestal stood. It was made of a dark, polished stone, and it seemed to be the focal point of the entire chamber. Surrounding it were dozens of smaller machines, each one connected to the pedestal by glowing cables. The pedestal itself was empty, but there was a slot in its center, large enough for the device in his pocket. Without thinking, Elon approached the pedestal. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him. The device in his hand seemed to pulse, almost in sync with the glowing symbols on the walls. It was as if the room was alive, waiting for him to make the next move. He reached into his pocket and retrieved the device. It hummed softly in his hand, the screen flickering as he held it above the pedestal. The symbols on the walls seemed to shift, and a low, resonant tone filled the room, vibrating through his chest. Without hesitation, Elon placed the device into the slot. The moment he did, the room seemed to come alive. The machines hummed louder, their lights flickering to life. The pedestal began to glow with an otherworldly light, casting long shadows across the walls. The symbols on the walls pulsed faster, as if they were communicating with the device. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The air grew thick with tension, and Elon's breath caught in his throat. He could feel something massive about to happen, but he didn't know what it was. His heart raced in his chest as the energy in the room built to a fever pitch. And then, with a sudden burst of light, the pedestal began to levitate. The machines around him buzzed with power, and the ground beneath his feet vibrated. Elon staggered back, his mind reeling. The pedestal was no longer anchored to the ground, it was floating, hovering in mid-air, bathed in a brilliant glow. The screen on the device flickered again, and a new message appeared. The truth awaits. Prepare yourself, Mr. Musk. The world you know is about to change. Elon's eyes widened as the message sank in. What had he just unlocked? What was this technology, and who had built it? The room seemed to pulse with a new, terrifying energy, and Elon felt a chill creep up his spine. He had uncovered something much larger than he had anticipated. He backed away from the pedestal, his mind racing with questions. But as he turned to leave the room, something stopped him. A figure appeared in the doorway, tall, cloaked in shadow. At first, Elon thought it was a trick of the light, but as the figure stepped forward, it became clear that it was no illusion. The figure was humanoid in shape but appeared almost translucent, as if made of light itself. Its eyes glowed with a soft, ethereal radiance, and its movements were fluid, as if it was part of the very air around him. Elon froze, his heart skipping a beat. He had never seen anything like this before. The figure spoke, its voice low and resonant, echoing in his mind. You have come far, Mr. Musk. But the true journey is just beginning. The figure stepped closer, and Elon could feel a strange pressure building in the air around him. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. Who, or what, was this being? What did it want from him? Before he could respond, the figure raised its hand, and the room's lights flickered once more. The machines hummed louder, and the pedestal beneath him began to pulse with a new intensity. Elon's vision blurred for a split second, and when it cleared, he found himself standing in a different place altogether. The hidden chamber had disappeared, replaced by an endless void of swirling lights and shifting patterns. The air was thick with energy, and Elon felt as though he was standing at the center of the universe itself, connected to everything, and yet, nothing at all. The figure's voice filled his mind again. This is the nexus, Mr. Musk. This is where the threads of reality converge. You have unlocked the gateway. But are you ready for the truth? Elon's breath caught in his throat. He had no idea what he had just entered. But one thing was certain, he was no longer in control. The truth was out there, and it was waiting for him. Elon's mind raced, trying to process everything that had just happened. One moment, he had been standing in the hidden chamber, surrounded by glowing machines and an ancient pedestal that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The next moment, he was standing in an endless void, the very air around him charged with an otherworldly energy. Nothing made sense anymore. The figure, the being that had appeared before him, hovered just a few feet away, its glowing eyes fixed on Elon. Its form seemed to shimmer in and out of existence, as if it was more an idea than a physical being. This is the nexus, Mr. Musk, the voice echoed again in his mind, a deep resonance that felt both alien and familiar. The meeting point of all realities. The center of knowledge and truth. But it is not something you can control. Not yet. Elon swallowed hard. What do you mean by that? What is this place? And who, or what, are you? The figure remained silent for a moment, its eyes piercing into him. A flicker of emotion passed across its form, regret. Or perhaps a knowing sadness. It was difficult to tell. Then, in a soft, almost pitying tone, it spoke again. I am a guardian of this place, Mr. Musk. I have been tasked with overseeing the convergence of knowledge and the flow of time. This realm, this nexus, exists beyond your understanding, beyond the limits of your dimension. But you have unlocked it. You have unlocked the path to greater truths. Elon felt a shiver run down his spine. The gravity of the situation was beginning to sink in. The nexus, he realized, was something far beyond his technological expertise. This was not a world shaped by physics, engineering, or science, it was something far more mysterious. Something ancient and something tied to the very fabric of existence itself. Why me? Elon asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why did I find this place? Why was I chosen? The figure paused again, as though contemplating his question. Then, with a sudden shift in its tone, it spoke once more. Because you are a seeker, Mr. Musk. A visionary. You have always sought to push the boundaries of what is possible. To expand your reach. But what you seek is more than just the stars. You seek understanding. Knowledge. That is why you have come here. Elon's mind spun. This wasn't just about technology anymore. It wasn't just about Mars or Tesla or any of the innovations he had worked on throughout his life. This was bigger than anything he had ever imagined. The nexus, the very fabric of reality itself, had been unlocked by his curiosity, his drive to understand the unknown. A feeling of awe and dread washed over him at the same time. What could this truth be? And what would it mean for the world he knew? So what now? Elon asked, his voice firm but edged with uncertainty. What is the next step? What do I need to do? The figure's form flickered, and the energy around him seemed to hum in response. The path is not clear, Mr. Musk. The truth you seek is hidden in layers, veiled by time and space. But to find it, you must first confront the reality you know. You must decide if you are ready to embrace what lies ahead, for the choices you make here will ripple through your world and beyond. They will change everything. Elon's pulse quickened. Change everything? What could that possibly mean? Before he could ask another question, the nexus seemed to shift. The swirling lights around him began to coalesce, forming images, memories, fragments of things he couldn't fully understand. His mind strained to keep up as fleeting visions flashed before his eyes, images of Earth, his Earth, being torn apart by storms, cities submerged in water, fires consuming the land. But amidst the chaos, he saw glimpses of hope, people working together, building new structures, reclaiming the planet, overcoming the odds. The future is not set in stone, Mr. Musk, the figure said, its voice quieter now. The choices you make here will determine which path the world follows. You have the power to shape the future. But it will not be easy. Elon stood still, absorbing the weight of the figure's words. The Nexus was not just a place of knowledge, it was a place of potential. The power to change the course of humanity was within his grasp. But the responsibility, the burden, felt overwhelming. A sudden wave of realization hit him. The device in his pocket, the one that had brought him here, was more than just a tool. It was a key. A key to unlocking the future. A key to unlocking everything. The figure, sensing Elon's understanding, nodded solemnly. You are beginning to comprehend, Mr. Musk. But there is more. Much more. The path you must walk is fraught with peril. It is not a journey for the faint of heart. And you must not walk it alone. Elon frowned. What do you mean? Who else is involved in this? I've been working alone for so long. But before he could finish his sentence, a new image appeared in the swirling lights around him. A face. A familiar face. It was Sarah, his former partner, the one he had parted ways with years ago. She was standing in front of a vast, futuristic city, one that Elon didn't recognize. In the background, towering structures stretched high into the sky, their sleek designs defying imagination. But Sarah's expression was tense, filled with uncertainty. Sarah, Elon murmured under his breath. The figure didn't answer, but the weight of the image hung in the air. You must find her, the figure said, its voice like a whisper. She holds the key to the next step of your journey. You must reunite, for only together can you face the challenges ahead. Elon's thoughts spun. Sarah? How could she possibly be involved in this? What role did she play in all of this, and why had she been brought into the fold now? The figure's glowing eyes fixed on him. The threads of destiny have intertwined, Mr. Musk. The choices you make will shape the outcome, but you will not do it alone. Elon's mind raced. His future, the future of humanity, it all rested on his shoulders now. But the path ahead was unclear. The Nexus had shown him the power of choice, but it had also shown him the consequences. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew one thing for sure, whatever this journey was, it would not be easy. It would be filled with danger, uncertainty, and hard choices. And at the center of it all, there was Sarah. The woman who had once been so close to him, who had once shared his vision. Now, she was more than just a memory. She was part of the puzzle. And he needed to find her, to understand what role she played in all of this. With determination in his heart, Elon turned to the figure. Where do I go now? The figure's eyes glowed brightly as it spoke one final time. Follow the signs. They will lead you to her. The air around Elon seemed to hum with energy as the figure's words echoed in his mind. Follow the signs. The phrase repeated itself, over and over, like a mantra. What signs? Where would he find them? And why Sarah? The questions seemed endless, but as much as he tried to reason through them, the answers weren't forthcoming. He had always been driven by facts, by data. But this was different. It didn't operate on logic alone. It was about intuition, perception, and something far beyond his grasp. The Nexus had revealed so much yet left him with more questions than answers. It was clear that the future he was facing, the role he was meant to play, was tied to Sarah in ways that Elon couldn't fully understand. He hadn't seen her in years, since their paths had diverged after a painful breakup. Yet, now her image had appeared in the strange visions inside the Nexus, tied to a futuristic city that seemed both alien and familiar at once. There was something about it that felt significant. He needed to find her. But how? Where would she be? The last he had heard, she had moved on with her life, pursuing her own projects far away from him and his chaotic ventures. Could she even still be part of the equation? Elon felt the device in his pocket pulse again, the faint hum reminding him of its strange power. The symbols he had seen earlier, on the walls, on the machines, even in the air itself, flashed through his mind like fleeting lightning strikes. He knew the device was more than a mere tool. It was a bridge. A conduit for information. A path that could guide him, if he could just figure out how to read it. His hand trembled slightly as he pulled the device from his pocket, staring at the screen. The once flickering display now had a steady glow, and for the first time, it felt like it was waiting for his next move. He tapped a few keys, not really knowing what he was doing but trusting that somehow, the device would lead him. Suddenly, the screen flashed a series of cryptic symbols. Then, a location appeared, a set of coordinates. His pulse quickened. The coordinates were not for any place he recognized. The location was remote, in the heart of the Rocky Mountains, a place few would associate with high-tech innovation. But Elon knew the importance of this. He had no other leads, no other direction to follow. Without wasting another moment, he programmed the coordinates into his map app and set off, heading for the nearest private airstrip. If the Nexus had shown him the way, he wasn't going to waste any more time second-guessing his instincts. Hours later, as Elon soared through the sky in his private jet, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the journey that lay ahead. The Rockies sprawled beneath him, their jagged peaks blanketed in snow. The further he flew, the more isolated he felt. It was as if the world was shrinking around him, the noise of civilization fading away, replaced by the soft hum of the jet's engines and the occasional beeping from the device in his hand. The coordinates led him to a small, unassuming town on the edge of the mountains. The kind of place most people passed through without a second thought. A town so quiet that it almost seemed forgotten by time. The kind of place where secrets could hide in plain sight. He landed the jet on a remote runway not far from the town, his mind racing with possibilities. He didn't know exactly what he would find here, but he couldn't afford to ignore the pull of the Nexus. He had to follow it. As he stepped out of the jet, the cold mountain air hit him, sharp and invigorating. His breath formed in clouds before him, the stillness of the wilderness settling around him. He was far from the cutting-edge laboratories of Silicon Valley now, and the contrast was jarring. This place was not about technology, it was about something else. Something deeper. The town was small, the streets lined with quaint houses and a few scattered businesses. The entire town seemed to be caught in a time warp, as if the world had moved on but left this place behind. Elon felt a strange unease creep over him as he made his way through the streets. There were no bustling crowds, no signs of modern life. Just a few people, each seemingly lost in their own thoughts. As he passed by a small diner, he stopped. A woman was standing outside, wiping down the windows. She wore a faded apron, and her expression was distant, lost. But as he stepped closer, she looked up, and their eyes met. For a brief moment, Elon felt a strange recognition, though he knew he had never seen her before. It was then that he realized the significance of the diner. The last time he had been in a small town like this, he had met someone who had opened his eyes to a new way of thinking, someone who had changed the course of his life. Could this be another turning point? Elon walked up to the woman, his steps deliberate. He wasn't sure why he felt compelled to speak to her, but the device in his pocket seemed to hum louder as he approached. The connection, the pull of the Nexus, was growing stronger. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm but edged with urgency. "I'm looking for someone. A woman named Sarah." The woman blinked, as if taken aback by his directness. She studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I've heard of her," she said in a quiet voice. "She's not from here. But she's been through. A couple of years ago, she came through this way. Stayed for a while." Elon's heart skipped a beat. A couple of years ago? That fit with what the Nexus had shown him, the vision of Sarah standing in front of a futuristic city. She had been here. But what had brought her to this town? Do you know where she went? Elon asked, leaning forward. Anything you can tell me could help. The woman's eyes softened. I don't know where she is now, but there's a place. A little cabin up the mountain. It's not far, maybe half a day's hike. I've seen her go there before. But be careful, Mr. Musk. This place is not what it seems. Elon's curiosity flared. What do you mean? What's up there? The woman hesitated before speaking. I don't know for sure, but there's something strange about that cabin. People say it's where the past and the future meet. And sometimes, people don't come back the same. Elon felt a shiver run down his spine. The Nexus. Sarah. The future. Everything was coming together. He had to find her. He had to understand what was going on. But now, it wasn't just about Sarah, it was about the world itself. The wind howled through the trees as Elon made his way up the narrow, winding trail leading to the cabin. The air was thin and crisp, the altitude pressing down on him with each labored breath. He had packed lightly, a backpack with essentials and the device, which seemed to pulse intermittently, guiding him with an almost eerie precision. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The quiet of the mountain was suffocating, the silence broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the snap of a twig underfoot. There was something off about this place, something ancient, like the land itself was aware of his presence. The woman at the diner had been right, this place was not what it seemed. Every instinct in Elon screamed that this cabin, this remote location, was part of something far bigger than just a simple meeting place. His mind raced with thoughts of Sarah. Why had she come here? What was it about this cabin that had drawn her? The visions he had seen in the Nexus flickered in his mind. He had seen her, standing in front of that futuristic city. But that was only part of the mystery. There was something in her eyes, a determination that spoke to the challenges she had faced. It was a look that Elon knew all too well. She was on a path that had crossed his own, and he had to find out why. The trail narrowed as he neared the peak, the dense forest parting to reveal a small clearing. At the center, a cabin stood, its wooden walls weathered but sturdy, nestled in the shadow of towering pine trees. The windows were dark, the door slightly ajar as if inviting him in. Elon approached cautiously, his footsteps quiet on the forest floor. He could feel the pull of the Nexus, the device buzzing softly in his pocket as if urging him forward. The closer he got to the cabin, the more he felt the strange energy surrounding the place, like a magnetic force drawing him in. He pushed open the door, the wood creaking under his hand. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the cabin felt abandoned, yet not quite empty. There was a strange tension in the room, as though time itself had frozen. The faint smell of wood and earth lingered in the air, and the only sound was the low whine of the wind outside. The cabin was sparsely furnished, an old stone fireplace in one corner, a worn leather chair by the window, and a small wooden table that seemed to have been hastily cleared. On the table lay a collection of papers, some scattered, some folded neatly. Elon stepped forward, his eyes scanning the room. There was no sign of Sarah. No sign of anyone, for that matter. But then, his gaze fell upon the walls. Strange symbols were etched into the wood, the lines carved deep into the grain as if by some unknown hand. They weren't just random marks, they formed intricate patterns, almost like a language. Elon's heart raced. The same symbols he had seen in the Nexus. The same symbols that had been on the device he carried. He reached out to touch the symbols, feeling the warmth of the wood under his fingertips. As soon as he made contact, the air around him seemed to shift. The room pulsed with energy, the walls vibrating slightly as though responding to his touch. The device in his pocket hummed louder, and Elon pulled it out, his breath catching as the screen flickered to life. The device displayed a map of the cabin, with the symbols marking specific points within the room. Elon followed the path the map indicated, moving toward the fireplace. As he approached, he noticed something he hadn't seen before, a small trapdoor hidden beneath the rug. The rug was old and frayed, but it hadn't been disturbed for some time. His mind raced. This was it. This was the moment he had been waiting for. He moved quickly, pulling the rug aside and crouching down to lift the trapdoor. It was heavy, resistant at first, but with a firm grip, he managed to open it. Beneath the floorboards lay a dark, narrow staircase leading down into the unknown. Without hesitation, Elon descended into the darkness, the faint glow from the device lighting his path. The air grew cooler as he went deeper, the walls of the tunnel narrowing until he was almost crawling. He felt the pressure building in his chest, the claustrophobia setting in, but he pushed forward. This was the path he had to follow. He had no choice but to keep going. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel finally opened up into a cavernous space. The walls were lined with more symbols, larger, more complex, and glowing faintly in the dim light. At the center of the cavern stood a large stone structure, its form both alien and ancient. The air here was thick with energy, the kind that made the hairs on the back of Elon's neck stand on end. The device in his hand was now vibrating wildly, and Elon's pulse quickened. This was it. This was the heart of the Nexus. The convergence point. The place where everything, his past, his future, and the world itself, would be decided. At the base of the stone structure, a single object sat. It was a pedestal, similar to the one he had seen in the Nexus, and on it rested a small, glowing orb. The orb pulsed with a steady rhythm, as if alive. Elon stepped forward, his hand reaching for it. But as his fingers brushed the surface of the orb, a voice echoed in his mind. "Do not touch it, Elon." He froze. The voice was familiar. It was Sarah's voice. "You have to understand, it's not just an object. It's a choice." Elon's heart skipped a beat. Sarah? Was she here? Was this a trick? His mind raced, and before he could react, the orb began to glow brighter, its light blinding, overwhelming. The ground beneath him shook, and the cavern seemed to tremble in response. The walls began to close in, the symbols on the stone structure shifting, rearranging themselves before his eyes. The air felt thick, charged with energy. It was as if the very fabric of time and space was unraveling around him. "Elon, you need to make a choice," Sarah's voice rang out again, clearer this time, almost as if she was standing right next to him. "This is the moment that will define everything. The future. The past. All of it. The Nexus can change it all, but only if you understand the cost." Elon stared at the orb, his hand still hovering above it. The weight of the moment pressed down on him. He had always been driven by the desire to solve problems, to find answers. But this was something different. This wasn't just about technology, about innovation. This was about the future of everything. The future of humanity. The future of reality itself. He closed his eyes, the hum of the Nexus filling his ears. "What do I do, Sarah?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. The orb flickered again, the light intensifying. "You make the choice, Elon. Only you can." The light from the orb was almost blinding, but Elon couldn't look away. It felt like the very essence of the universe was contained within its glowing core. As he stood there, suspended between uncertainty and the weight of the world, Sarah's voice echoed again in his mind. The voice was calm yet urgent, as though it carried the gravity of the universe itself. "Elon, this is the moment. You have to choose. What you decide will change everything." His heart pounded in his chest as he continued to hover his hand over the orb. His mind raced, torn between reason and the overwhelming sense that this was bigger than anything he had ever encountered. For all his years of innovation, all the advances in technology and space exploration, this felt different. It was as though this decision had nothing to do with his past work, his achievements, his success. This was about something deeper. Something far beyond him. The ground beneath him vibrated more violently, the symbols around him pulsing in time with the orb's glow. The entire cavern seemed alive, as if it was waiting for him to act. The nexus had led him here, and now it was asking him to choose his path. Sarah, what choice? What am I supposed to do? Elon whispered, feeling the pressure mounting. A long pause. Then, Sarah's voice returned, quieter this time, like a distant whisper. Elon, this orb, it's not just an object. It's a nexus point. It has the power to shift timelines, to reshape the course of humanity. It holds the key to the future you've seen in your visions, but also to a future that could spiral out of control. It's not about what's easy. It's about what's right. His fingers were just inches from the orb now, trembling with uncertainty. Was he ready to bear this responsibility? Could he really carry the weight of a decision that could change the world, and not just for himself but for everyone? The light from the orb intensified, almost painfully bright now, until Elon had to shield his eyes. The warmth from its glow reached deep into his chest, tugging at something inside him. He thought of all the people who depended on him, on his innovations, on his vision. He thought of his companies, the billions of people whose lives had been impacted by his work. He had always prided himself on making decisions that would push humanity forward, that would create a better world. But this wasn't about the future of technology. It was about the future itself. What's right? Elon asked softly, his voice trembling. How do I even know what's right? The cavern around him seemed to respond. The air hummed louder, the symbols on the stone walls glowing brighter. The sense of urgency thickened. You'll know when you're ready, Sarah's voice answered, now a soft but resolute whisper. Trust yourself. You've always known what's right for the world, even when it seemed impossible. This is no different. His hand shook as he extended it toward the orb, feeling the intense pull of its power. It was almost as if the orb itself was alive, responding to his hesitation. Elon knew that this was the final moment. He had to decide. As his fingers brushed the surface of the orb, a surge of energy coursed through his body. The light from the orb exploded outward, and for a split second, the world seemed to warp around him. He was no longer standing in the cavern but floating in an expanse of light, universal and timeless, a place between reality and what could be. Visions flashed before his eyes, flashes of past, present, and future. He saw his innovations, the world-changing technologies he had birthed, but he also saw darker paths, paths where those same innovations had led to ruin. He saw cities torn apart by the very creations meant to uplift them. He saw humanity divided, fractured by greed, power, and fear. And then, he saw Sarah. She stood in a vast, futuristic city, her face calm but resolute. She wasn't just a part of the future, she was its anchor. He saw her with a group of people, each with a different role, a different purpose. But Sarah was the one who held everything together. She was the key to the future, a future that depended on the choices they both made. The visions faded as quickly as they had come, and Elon found himself back in the cavern, standing before the pedestal with the orb. The light dimmed, but the weight of what he had just witnessed lingered in the air. I understand now, he whispered to no one in particular. He had seen it, the future, his role in it, and the impact of the choices he was about to make. It wasn't about technology alone. It wasn't just about achieving the impossible. It was about balance. About keeping the world from tipping too far into chaos, while still pushing forward into new possibilities. He had to protect the future, but not at any cost. His hand hovered over the orb once more. This time, it was steady. This time, he was ready. With a deep breath, Elon made his decision. The moment his fingers made contact with the orb, the world around him exploded in light. A powerful wave of energy surged through him, and for a brief moment, he was consumed by it. The cavern seemed to spin, the walls, the symbols, and the very air itself dissolving into nothingness. And then, in an instant, it was gone. When Elon opened his eyes, he was no longer in the cavern. The space had shifted. He found himself standing in the center of a vast, bright city, a city like the one he had seen in his vision, but more tangible, more real. Skyscrapers stretched high into the sky, their surfaces gleaming with advanced technology. Below him, the streets were alive with people, moving in harmony with their environment, their every need met by the technology around them. But the city was not perfect. There was a tension beneath the surface, an underlying fear that hung in the air. It was clear that the world had been shaped by choices, some made with good intentions, others driven by greed and power. And somewhere, in the heart of this city, was Sarah. Elon's mission was clear now. He had to find her. Elon stood in the heart of the city, his eyes scanning the futuristic landscape that stretched before him. The towering skyscrapers glittered in the sunlight, their sleek surfaces reflecting the world below. The streets were bustling with people, each seemingly absorbed in their own worlds, interacting with the environment around them in ways that felt both advanced and surreal. Autonomous vehicles zipped past, while drones hovered above, delivering goods to those who needed them. It was a vision of the future, a place where technology had reached its zenith. But Elon couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Despite the apparent harmony, there was a quiet tension in the air, an unease that settled in the pit of his stomach. The people here seemed controlled, as if they were living in a world that was too perfect, too structured. There was no spontaneity, no wild energy that Elon had come to expect from true innovation. He adjusted the device in his pocket, the one that had brought him here. It pulsed with energy, more intense now, as though guiding him towards something, or someone. Sarah, he muttered under his breath, his gaze sweeping the crowd. He had to find her. The visions had shown her to him, standing at the center of this city, a pivotal figure in whatever future they were about to face. But where was she? What role did she play in all of this? As he began to walk through the streets, the city seemed to respond to his presence. People paused and glanced at him, their expressions unreadable, their movements synchronized with the hum of the environment. It was as though they were all connected to the same source, each individual a part of a greater machine. Elon's heart beat faster. This wasn't the future he had envisioned, a world of limitless innovation and progress. This was something else. It was as if the promise of a better world had been taken too far, driven to perfection but at the cost of something essential. Something human. He made his way toward a large square in the center of the city, the device in his pocket buzzing more urgently now. The square was surrounded by massive holographic displays, advertisements flashing in every direction, promoting the latest in tech, sustainability, and unity. But there was no sense of individuality here, just a relentless push for conformity. And then, he saw her. Sarah stood in the center of the square, her back straight, her eyes scanning the crowd as if she were looking for someone like him. Her presence cut through the sterile perfection of the city, as if she were a beacon of something real, something alive in this sea of controlled progress. Elon's breath caught in his throat. It was her. It had to be. He rushed forward, weaving through the crowd, trying to get to her. The people around him didn't seem to notice, too absorbed in their tasks, in their digital worlds. It was as though they were part of a collective consciousness, moving in perfect synchrony. Finally, he reached her. She turned as he approached, and for a brief moment, their eyes locked. Sarah's expression softened, though her eyes held a depth of sadness that Elon had never seen before. She looked different, older, perhaps, but there was an undeniable strength in her presence. Elon, she said quietly, her voice tinged with a mix of relief and resignation. You found me. He took a step closer, his heart racing. I've been looking for you. I don't understand, how did you end up here? What is this place? Sarah took a deep breath, glancing around them. The square felt like it was closing in, the holographic advertisements blurring into the background. The world felt like it was moving too fast, too efficiently, but there was no warmth. No soul. This is the future I chose, Sarah said, her voice heavy with something that felt like regret. But it's not the future I wanted. Elon frowned, confused. What do you mean? This place, this city, looks perfect. Everything's in harmony, isn't it? Everyone's taken care of, living in a world of progress. Sarah shook her head, her eyes distant. That's what they want you to think. That everything is fine. But you're not seeing what's beneath the surface. Elon's mind raced as he processed her words. Beneath the surface? What's going on here, Sarah? What's really happening? Before Sarah could respond, the device in Elon's pocket began to vibrate violently, a high-pitched tone filling the air. It was the same tone he had heard in the Nexus, the one that signaled something important, something dangerous. What's happening? He demanded, looking at Sarah. Her face tightened with concern. We don't have much time. They're coming. Elon's heart skipped a beat. Who? Sarah's eyes flicked nervously to the sky, where several drones were hovering, their cameras focused intently on them. The controllers. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. They keep everything in check. They make sure the city stays perfect. But at what cost? As if on cue, a voice crackled through the air, clear and authoritative, booming from the drones. Citizen Sarah and Elon Musk, you are in violation of city protocol. Please comply with the directives and proceed to the holding area for questioning. Elon's mind raced. This wasn't the future he had imagined. It wasn't the world he had wanted to create. He had thought that humanity would thrive through innovation, through the freedom to explore, create, and grow. But this? This was a world where control had replaced freedom, and perfection had come at the expense of individuality. Sarah, what did you get us into? Elon muttered, fear creeping into his voice for the first time since he had arrived. But Sarah's face remained calm, resolute. I didn't get us into anything, Elon. I'm trying to stop it. I thought I could make it work, but the controllers, they're too powerful. We can't change anything from here. Elon felt a surge of determination. He couldn't let this stand. He couldn't let the future be locked in such a sterile, controlled existence. There had to be a way to break free. Then we'll change it. Together, he said, his voice steady. Sarah gave him a small, bittersweet smile. I hope you're right, Elon. But we're up against something much bigger than you or me. The drones moved closer, their mechanical hum growing louder as they circled above. Elon could feel the pressure building, the tension thick in the air. He had made it this far, and now he wasn't going to back down. They had to find a way to break the hold of the controllers. They had to fight for a future where freedom wasn't just a memory. Elon's mind raced as he and Sarah stood together, surrounded by the drones, their mechanical buzzes filling the air. The voice that had spoken through the speakers was unnervingly calm, as if it were merely an everyday occurrence. But Elon knew better. This was no ordinary system. The controllers, whoever they were, had a level of control over the city, and perhaps over reality itself, that was unlike anything he had ever encountered. What do they want with us? Elon whispered, his eyes scanning the drones hovering overhead. Sarah's expression darkened. They don't want anything from us. They want to control us. Control everyone. Elon felt a pang of dread. Control how? Sarah looked at him, her eyes serious. The controllers have perfected the art of surveillance, manipulation, and compliance. They maintain order in the city, but it's not through innovation or choice. It's through absolute control. They watch every movement, every decision, every interaction. They can predict what you're going to do before you even do it. And if you stray from their parameters, you're eliminated. Elon's blood ran cold. Eliminated? Sarah nodded grimly. They erase you. They make you disappear, like you were never here. They don't leave room for mistakes, for rebellion, for anything that could disrupt the illusion of perfection. As if on cue, the drones descended toward them, their mechanical legs locking into place, and a new voice, far colder than the last, spoke, its tone authoritative and robotic. Sarah, Elon Musk, you have violated city protocol. This is your final warning. Proceed to the holding area immediately. Elon felt a sudden surge of panic. They had no time to waste. The controllers were clearly not bluffing, and he was no longer sure that Sarah's calm demeanor was enough to protect them. He turned toward Sarah, eyes full of resolve. We can't just go with them. We have to escape. We have to fight back. Her gaze softened, but there was a weary sadness behind her eyes. Elon, we can't fight them. Not here. The city is theirs. They control everything, every part of it, from the smallest drone to the energy running through the city. We have no leverage. No power. He clenched his fists, frustration building. Then we'll find another way. We have to. Sarah hesitated for a moment, her eyes scanning the drones and the crowd around them. The people walking by paid them no attention, their eyes glazed, lost in their own world of digital interfaces. It was as if they were unable, or unwilling, to see the danger that was closing in on them. There is one way, Sarah said quietly. But it's dangerous. If we're caught, they'll erase us both. Elon felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean? What's the plan? She glanced around once more, her voice barely above a whisper. There's a hidden network in the city, one that the controllers don't control, at least, not entirely. It's a resistance. They've been trying to fight back against the system, but they've been hunted down, one by one. Elon felt a flicker of hope. A resistance? How do we find them? Sarah's face grew serious. I have a contact, someone on the inside. But we have to move quickly. If the controllers find out we're trying to escape, we're done for. He nodded, determination setting in. Then let's move. Without another word, Sarah led the way, weaving through the streets at a brisk pace. Elon followed closely behind, trying to keep his head low and avoid drawing attention. The drones hovered overhead, their cold, mechanical eyes scanning the crowds. He couldn't help but feel the weight of their presence, as though they were aware of every move he made. They took a series of back alleys, avoiding the main thoroughfares. The city seemed to close in around them, the towering buildings casting long shadows in the twilight. The air felt thick, charged with tension. Sarah led them to a small, unmarked door in the side of a building, hidden in the shadow of one of the skyscrapers. It was an inconspicuous entrance. If you didn't know it was there, you'd never notice it. She knocked in a specific pattern, and after a moment, the door creaked open. A figure stepped out from the darkness. He was tall, wearing a long coat, and his face was obscured by a hood. His eyes glinted with a mixture of caution and recognition as he glanced at Elon and Sarah. "You're late," the man said, his voice low and tense. "We had to be careful," Sarah replied, her voice strained. "The controllers are on to us." The man nodded, his gaze flicking nervously to the street behind them. "You brought him?" He pointed at Elon, his voice laced with uncertainty. "Yes," Sarah answered firmly. "He's the one who can help us. He's the key." The man studied Elon for a long moment, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. But then, he stepped aside and gestured for them to enter. "Hurry up. The window of opportunity is closing fast." Elon followed Sarah inside, his mind racing. The room was small, dimly lit, and smelled faintly of metal and old electronics. It looked like a makeshift safe house, a place that had been set up in secret, away from the prying eyes of the controllers. There were maps pinned to the walls, digital screens showing lines of code, and scattered papers with cryptic notes. "Who are you?" Elon asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. "What is this resistance? Why is it hidden like this?" The man turned to face him, his eyes hard but thoughtful. "We are the ones who refuse to bow down to the controllers. We're the ones who know what this city really is, and what it's doing to people. They promised peace, order, and prosperity, but all they've delivered is control, fear, and uniformity. We're trying to tear down the walls they've built around us, but it's a battle we're losing." Sarah stepped forward, her voice urgent. "But Elon, he's the one who can change things. He's the one who can break the system." The man looked at Elon again, studying him carefully. "You think so? What makes you think you're different from the others who've tried and failed?" Elon met his gaze, his resolve hardening. "Because I won't give up. I've spent my entire life pushing boundaries, creating possibilities where none existed. I won't stop until we have a future where freedom isn't a lie." For a long moment, the man didn't speak. Then, with a reluctant nod, he turned and started typing something into a console. "All right. You're in. But remember, you're not just fighting for your future. You're fighting for everyone's." Elon took a deep breath, his mind now fully focused. "I know. And I won't stop until we win." The dimly lit room was filled with the low hum of machines, the glow of screens casting an eerie light on the faces of the resistance. Elon felt a weight in the air that was different from anything he had experienced before. This wasn't just a group fighting for survival. These were people who had seen what the controllers were capable of, and who had dedicated their lives to bringing the system down. Every inch of the room radiated desperation and hope in equal measure. Elon stood at the center, his mind still spinning from everything that had just transpired. He had barely had time to catch his breath before being thrust into this hidden world. He could feel the tension in the air, as if everyone was waiting for him to say something, to do something. Sarah stood beside him, her face set with determination but also a quiet sadness. Elon could see it in her eyes. She had been carrying this burden for far too long, and now, with him by her side, the stakes were higher than ever. The man who had let them in, the one with the hood, stepped forward. His name, Elon had learned, was Felix. He was a high-ranking member of the resistance and had been watching the city's surveillance systems for years, trying to track any movements of the controllers. Felix gestured to a series of monitors set up against one wall. Each screen displayed different parts of the city, their feeds constantly shifting and flickering. There were no signs of life on any of them, just the quiet, unsettling emptiness that had taken over the streets. "This is what they've done," Felix said, his voice laced with bitterness. "They've made the city their prison, and everyone inside it is their prisoner. The controllers monitor everything, people, buildings, even thoughts. But they don't see everything. Not yet." Elon's gaze shifted to Sarah. She was staring at the monitors, her face unreadable. "How did you even find out about this?" Elon asked, trying to understand the sheer scale of the situation. Sarah sighed, her expression far away. "At first, it was small. A glitch here, a crack in the system there. I was just trying to get answers. But then I realized, the controllers are everywhere. They know everything about us. They have people inside, watching us all the time." Elon's brow furrowed. "But you're trying to stop them. You're trying to fight back." Sarah's eyes met his, a flash of hope sparking within them. "Yes, but we can't do it alone. That's where you come in, Elon. You have the influence. You have the ability to connect people and make them believe that a different future is possible. If we're going to win, we need more than just a small group of rebels. We need to wake the rest of the world up. We need to show them that they have power, that they don't have to live in fear of the controllers anymore." Elon felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. This was bigger than anything he had ever taken on. He had created things that changed the world, but this? This was a fight for the very soul of humanity. Felix, who had been watching the exchange between Elon and Sarah closely, stepped in again. Elon, we know you can do this. We've been watching you for years, your innovations, your ability to inspire people. But this is going to take more than just technology. It's going to take a revolution of thought. People need to believe that they're not bound by the systems the controllers have created. We need to break them free, piece by piece. Elon felt a spark of realization. The controllers had been using technology to bind the people to their will, but technology, his technology, could be the very thing that set them free. If he could find a way to turn the tables, to use the tools of control against the controllers, maybe they stood a chance. What's the next step? Elon asked, his voice steady now, filled with purpose. Felix pointed to one of the screens. We have a way into their system. A backdoor, if you will. But we need to access it from within their headquarters. It's a highly secure facility, deep within the city. If we can breach it, we can expose their secrets, their plans. We can disrupt their hold on the city, and maybe, just maybe, we can start taking it back. Elon stared at the screen, the magnitude of what they were about to attempt hitting him all at once. And how do we get in? Sarah stepped forward, her voice firm. We don't just walk in, Elon. We'll need to plan. We'll need help. The facility is armed, and they won't hesitate to stop anyone who tries to get too close. But we know the weak points. We know the routes. Felix nodded. We'll need a diversion. Something big enough to draw their attention away from our infiltration team. While the controllers are distracted, we'll move in, plant the access points, and break the system wide open. Elon's mind was already racing through possibilities. A diversion. A hack. The logistics of breaking into a high-security facility and launching a revolution all in one go were daunting, but he had never been one to shy away from the impossible. He had faced challenges before, but nothing like this. This wasn't just about building a car, or a rocket, or a new piece of technology. This was about saving the future of the human race from a totalitarian regime that was suffocating it. How much time do we have? Elon asked, his gaze focused on the map Felix had pulled up on the screen. Felix's eyes were sharp, calculating. Not much. The controllers are always watching, and they won't miss any signs of rebellion. But we can't wait forever. The sooner we act, the better. Elon nodded, feeling the gravity of the situation weighing on him. There was no turning back now. If they were going to do this, they had to go all in. There was no half measure, no easy way out. It was either win or lose, fight or surrender. He turned to Sarah, meeting her eyes. We'll do it. We'll take down the controllers. Her face softened slightly, and for the first time, Elon saw a glimmer of the hope he had seen in her when they first met. Thank you, Elon. I knew you were the one who could make a difference. Elon gave a small, determined smile. We're in this together. As he turned back to face Felix, the room seemed to hum with energy. There was a plan now, a way forward. But it wouldn't be easy. The fight was far from over, and the controllers were not going to let their grip slip without a fight. But with every passing second, Elon felt the weight of his responsibility settle more firmly into place. They were about to take the first step in a battle that would change everything. For better or for worse, the future was in their hands. The night was heavy with anticipation. Elon stood before a digital map of the city, watching as blinking red lights marked key locations, the controllers' strongholds. The stakes were higher than ever. In just a few hours, they would be launching their most daring mission yet, to infiltrate the heart of the controllers' system, the city's central control facility. If they succeeded, they would expose the controllers' dark secrets, disrupt their control over the city, and, hopefully, ignite a revolution. Sarah stood beside him, her arms crossed, her face a mask of resolve. Elon could see the weight of the mission pressing on her too, but she didn't show it. Her eyes were clear, her movements purposeful. Felix was at a nearby terminal, tapping away at the keyboard with a sense of urgency. The other members of the resistance were preparing too, gathering equipment, checking their comms, and rehearsing their roles. "This is it," Elon said quietly, his voice steady but filled with a sense of the enormity of what they were about to do. "We're ready," Sarah replied, her voice firm but with a touch of uncertainty. She was the calm before the storm, the person who kept everyone grounded. "It's now or never," Felix added from the terminal. He glanced over at Elon. "Once we get inside, there's no turning back. The system will be on high alert. But if we can trigger the right signals, we'll have an opening." Elon nodded, his mind racing through the plan again. The resistance had worked tirelessly to gather intel on the city's infrastructure. They knew the weak spots, the hidden doors, the patterns in the surveillance. But the controllers were relentless, every step of the plan was a gamble. Every moment they were in the open was a risk. "We have one shot at this," Elon said, his voice gaining strength. "If we're going to take down the controllers, we have to hit them hard, fast, and together." Sarah gave him a determined look. "We will. But you need to stay focused, Elon. We need you to be the one to crack their system once we're inside." Elon met her gaze, feeling the weight of her words. She was counting on him, and more importantly, the people of the city were counting on them. If they failed, the controllers would crush any hope of freedom. He couldn't let that happen. The countdown had begun. The mission would start in 30 minutes. They moved through the darkened streets, the hum of the drones distant in the background. Elon had never seen the city like this before. Normally, it was a bustling metropolis, filled with the sounds of people, cars, and technology. But now, it was eerily quiet, like the calm before a storm. They were dressed in black tactical gear, each member of the resistance wearing a mask to hide their identity. The streets were deserted, save for the occasional drone that passed overhead, its mechanical buzz echoing through the night. "We're approaching the facility," Felix murmured, his eyes scanning the rooftops. The facility was located deep within the city's heart, a towering, fortress-like structure that stretched toward the sky. The controllers had built it to be impenetrable, the nerve center of their operations. But the resistance had mapped out its vulnerabilities, and tonight, they were going to exploit them. Felix led the way, using the back alleys to avoid detection. Elon and Sarah followed closely behind, their footsteps soundless on the concrete. The tension was palpable. They were only a few blocks away from the facility, but each step felt like it took them further into the unknown. As they neared the facility's perimeter, Elon felt a knot tighten in his stomach. They had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in their minds, but now that it was real, the danger felt all-consuming. They were about to breach the heart of the controller's empire. Felix turned to face the group, his face grim. "This is where we split up. You two," he pointed at Sarah and Elon, "will go to the main control room. I'll lead the others to create the diversion. Once the alarms go off, everything will be chaos. That's our chance to get inside and take down the system." Elon's heart raced. "What's the plan if the diversion fails?" Felix gave a curt shake of his head. "It won't fail. Trust me." With a final nod, the team split off, moving quickly and silently into position. Elon and Sarah crept toward the entrance, their hearts beating in sync with the ticking clock. The surveillance cameras that littered the area scanned the streets, their cold, robotic eyes scanning for any signs of movement. Elon felt every step of the journey as though the eyes of the controllers were upon him. "This is it," Sarah whispered, her breath steady. "We've come too far to back out now." Elon nodded, his mind focused on the mission ahead. They had to infiltrate the facility, reach the central control room, and access the backdoor Felix had discovered. If they succeeded, the controllers would lose their grip on the city. If they failed, Elon didn't want to consider the alternative. They reached the entrance of the facility, an unmarked door hidden in the shadows. Elon's hand shook slightly as he reached for the keypad beside the door. He input the code Felix had given him, his mind racing. Every second that passed brought them closer to discovery. There was no room for error. The door clicked open. "Let's go," Sarah urged, and they slipped inside. The air inside the facility was cool, sterile. The hum of the surveillance equipment buzzed around them, and the dim lights flickered as they moved through the corridors. The central control room was just ahead, but there were still obstacles to overcome. Elon's heart pounded in his chest as they navigated the hallways, every turn feeling like a step closer to the unknown. They reached the door to the control room. Elon pressed his ear to it, listening for any signs of movement inside. All was quiet, but he knew better than to trust that. The controllers were always watching. "On 3, Sarah whispered. 1, 2, 3. They burst through the door. Inside the control room, rows of monitors blinked in the dim light, displaying feeds of the city, its streets, its people. Elon quickly moved to one of the terminals, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he bypassed the security protocols. He could feel the system pushing back, trying to prevent him from gaining access. But he had done this before, breaking into systems, cracking codes, finding vulnerabilities. This was his domain. The screen flickered for a moment before displaying a warning, "Access denied." Elon cursed under his breath. The system was more advanced than he had anticipated. But he refused to give up. He tried again, his mind sharp as he searched for the right backdoor. "We don't have much time," Sarah whispered urgently. "They'll be on to us soon." Elon's fingers danced across the keyboard, his heart pounding as he fought the clock. "I know. Just a second." The screen flashed. "Access granted." Elon exhaled, a wave of relief washing over him. Elon's breath was shallow, his fingers trembling slightly as they hovered over the keyboard. He had successfully bypassed the initial security, but now, the true test had begun. The controllers had made it clear that they were always one step ahead, and this system was unlike anything he had ever faced before. It was layered with fail-safes, encrypted backdoors, and fail-safe systems that could lock him out in an instant. But Elon had faced worse challenges, and his mind was already racing through the possibilities. "I've got this," he muttered to himself as he typed furiously, watching the terminal flicker and buzz in response. Sarah stood nearby, her eyes scanning the room. The hum of the facility's air conditioning and the low beep of the machines filled the space, but underneath it all, there was an undercurrent of anxiety. They had come this far, but they weren't safe yet. Elon was in the zone, his focus unshaken, but the countdown to their success, or failure, was ticking away. "We need to move, Elon," Sarah said, her voice steady but edged with urgency. "The controllers are going to notice something's wrong soon. We've only got minutes." Elon looked up briefly, locking eyes with her. He could see the concern in her gaze, the weight of the responsibility they both shared. But there was no turning back now. They couldn't afford to fail. "I'm almost in," he said, his voice quieter, a hint of determination slipping through. Behind him, the door to the control room remained closed, but Elon knew that the resistance was depending on them. Felix and the others had set up the diversion, but that wouldn't last forever. The controllers had a way of tracking everything, and their ability to respond was frighteningly fast. A sudden beep from the terminal caught Elon's attention. His heart skipped a beat. "Access denied." The screen went black for a second before flashing another error message, "Breach detected. System lockdown in progress." Elon's blood ran cold. They had been found out. "No, no, no," he muttered, his fingers working faster than before. "I'm not losing this now." Sarah quickly moved to his side, her eyes scanning the facility's layout on another terminal. "We don't have much time. If they lock us out of this system, it'll be game over." The walls seemed to close in around them. Elon could feel the pressure building as the seconds ticked away. He knew this system was their last hope, a direct line to the controller's entire network. If they lost access, they would be cut off from everything, and the controllers would regain control. Come on, Elon whispered through gritted teeth. He re-entered the code, his hands moving like lightning, trying to bypass the system's firewalls. The clock was ticking down. The tension in the room thickened. Sarah was ready to react at a moment's notice. She knew what was at stake, and she trusted him more than she had trusted anyone before. Elon, she said sharply, pointing at a monitor in the corner. They're coming. You need to finish this now. He saw the message, 3 red dots blinking in a tight formation. Drones were moving toward their location. His stomach clenched. Just a few more seconds, Elon promised, his mind racing. The system was trying to force him out, but he refused to give up now. He pushed through, his fingers never faltering as the pressure mounted. And then, the screen blinked, and a message appeared in bold letters, access granted. System unlocked. For a split second, time stood still. Then, a soft click echoed in the room. The system was wide open, vulnerable for the first time in years. We did it, Elon breathed, his eyes wide with disbelief and triumph. But there was no time to savor the victory. The alarm systems blared across the facility, the high-pitched wail filling the room and echoing down the hallways. Red lights began to flash, and the hum of the machines turned into a frenetic buzz. They had no more time to waste. Elon, we need to go. Sarah urged, her voice rising above the alarm. Without missing a beat, Elon moved swiftly toward the large main terminal, accessing the system to download all the data they could use. He had to act quickly, every second mattered. He could feel the weight of their success heavy on his shoulders. But that success would be meaningless if they didn't escape in time. I'm pulling everything, he said, his fingers flying over the keys as he siphoned data, codes, blueprints, and everything they could use to bring the controllers down. The whole system was coming apart at the seams, but the pressure was on. They had no idea how much time they had before the backup systems activated. The door to the control room crashed open with a violent bang. Elon's heart leapt into his throat. Go, 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 he shouted to Sarah. She grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the exit. They didn't need to exchange words. They knew what was at stake. As they sprinted down the corridor, Elon's mind raced. They had the data, but would it be enough? The controllers weren't going to give up without a fight. They had likely already mobilized their forces. But for the first time, Elon allowed himself to hope. They had found the chink in the armor. Now, it was time to tear the whole thing down. They reached the exit, their hearts pounding in their chests. Felix and the rest of the team were waiting for them, already in position. The diversion had worked. The controllers were busy scrambling to regain control of the system. Let's move. Felix shouted, his voice urgent. They ran as fast as they could through the facility's back corridors, weaving through the shadows. The sound of pursuing drones echoed behind them, but they were too far ahead. Finally, they reached the escape point. The underground tunnel. They were almost free. As they made their way down the tunnel, Elon couldn't help but think of everything they had been through, the sacrifices, the pain, the losses. But this moment was different. The end of the controller's reign was in sight. And then, as they emerged into the cold night air, the sound of the city's pulse felt different. It was no longer a hum of control, it was the sound of life, of possibility. This is it, Sarah said, her voice filled with emotion. We've done it. Elon nodded, but his mind was already shifting toward what came next. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. The fight for the future of the city had only just begun. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?